I do think there is something about resilience. Not everything is as magical. Your career is a glide path of bumps, moments of ecstasy and joy, moments of depression and fear and anxiety. And you've got to be able to handle those as much as you handle the success as well. I always say to people, I think if you want to learn about procurement, start at the bottom, at the real coal face of some of the things that you have to do. You can't have a lean supply chain if you don't understand the dynamics of the power of the supply chain in which you're operating in. Looking back, the measures of success aren't just in the here and now.
Yeah.
It's also the legacy that you want to leave behind in terms of how well what you've accomplished is able to continue to thrive and develop post you leaving the role that you were in. But I think the ask of leadership is that you also build kind of capability and depth and modes of operation that survive the point of inflection that you've contributed to that change. There isn't kind of a magic formula of how you go in and have a conversation with a CEO. It's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable, and then you're going to do it again and you're going to get more comfortable. People might be curious about my perspective on how you get to become a CPO. And one of the things I think is...
In this podcast series, we're talking to inspiring leaders of procurement and supply chain. Join me as we explore their journey, their achievements, and their career advice. This way, you can integrate them into your career and achieve the same. I'm Marco Marambe, Managing Director at Procurato. Hi, today we're here with Stephen Day. Stephen Day is CPO at Kantar. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, how
are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, you're welcome, and thanks for attending.
Thank you.
So, Stephen, the way we usually approach this is a bit of an introduction from yourself, really, about what you're proud of doing at the place you work in and how you enjoy it working with your teams.
Yeah.
But we start even before that with a little bit about yourself,
Okay,
really.
yeah.
So if you could give me a bit of a sense of how people would describe you, and let's start with maybe your family.
Oh, it's a good one, yeah.
And how they describe you as Stephen. And then maybe talk a bit about your friends, and then, we can move on to what you're doing.
Well, it's nice you should ask, because we always have a tendency to get straight into the business stuff, don't we? And we never talk about our personal life. But for those that are interested, I've been married, but actually be celebrating my silver anniversary in September, believe it or not. So that was a very quick 25 years, I can tell you. So I've been married to Natalie for 25 years. I don't want to reveal my age on this podcast, but we've actually known each other for 36 years. Oh, wow. So we met each other at university, but we were just kind of friends, and then
high school lovers.
You could say that sounds very romantic. That does. And then we got together, and we've done a bit of traveling through my career. And what might surprise people is that, and along the way, we have had 4 children, so 2 girls and 2 boys. And sadly, so far, the 3 children that have gone to university have all decided to pursue careers in marketing.
No, of course.
Not procurement or supply chain.
No.
So
one of our key stakeholders usually, right? We have a little bit of a chat with sometimes.
That's right, yeah. So we live in Surrey, but I was originally born in Coventry, if anybody can detect a Midlands twang. And so that's the family side of things. And then as I think many people do with families, large parts of your life are consumed with, supporting your children to do their sports or their academic things and stuff like that. So it's been very enjoyable, and we're just,
and
as
if
a
they
family,
were here, what would they say about you?
What would they say about me?
How would they describe you? Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, you like to think, oh, my father's fantastic, charismatic, brilliant. The truth is, he's grumpy, distracted. He's always on his phone. But I think what I've tried to impress upon the children is this concept, which I feel very strongly about, is really a couple of things. Number one is life is a lifelong journey of learning, really. You don't stop learning at university or at school or things like that. And I think that's really, really important, that concept is, that kind of growth mindset is with you from the get-go.
Yeah.
The second thing is I'd implore the children to just be inquisitive. And I think that is it's really important these days, because, everybody uses social media. And if you're not using different sources of social media and you're not using different sources of news, I think there's a real danger that you can get a very, very biased point of view about the big themes that are going on around the world. So
the
I think you
rabbit
have to,
holes,
yeah,
and
exactly.
echo chambers that they
All
talk
of those
about.
things.
Yeah.
And, the number of times, we've had conversations as families where, they've talked about things that they've seen, and then you kind of explore that a little bit. So that's something. And then the third thing I've tried to say to them is kind of lean into every experience that you have at work. So both my daughters are working, really enjoying their work, being very successful, and they have their challenges. And I do think there is something about resilience. And not everything is magical. Your career is a glide path of bumps,
Yeah.
moments of ecstasy and joy,
Yeah.
moments of depression and fear and anxiety, and you've got to be able to handle those as much as you handle the success as well.
Yeah, and I look forward to going through all of this in our conversation with you. So, and if your friends were to describe you, what would they say about Stephen?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things I like to think is I'm quite humorous.
Yeah.
I'm quite self-deprecating. I don't take myself too seriously. I learned a long time ago that the way of getting the best out of people is to really lean into their lives and their journey as well, and building empathy with people. I think people would say that about me as well.
No, that's great. Great. So let's start with the end of your not end of the career, but where you are now, really.
I'm still halfway through it.
You're still there. There's still quite a way to go, but where you are now, which is the end of the story really for us.
Yeah.
What are you proud of, what you're achieving as a team?
Yeah.
And then we'll start really the beginning of your journey. How you got to where you got to now.
Well, firstly, for those people that are watching this, so firstly, what is Kantar? Well, Kantar is a market research data analytics company. So, all of the brands of the world have to have some sense of what consumers think about their products and services. And that's really what Kantar does. And we're a company that has been around now for many, many years. And we've grown through acquisition up until the point of around 2018, where we were part of WPP, the marketing services business, and they decided that what Kantar did wasn't really core to their main proposition. So they sold Kantar to Bain Capital. So we've been owned by Bain Capital since 2019. And I joined in March of 2020, very shortly after it had been acquired. And for those of you who remember, straight into COVID. So that was my launch into the company. And the brief at that point in time was, transform the procurement function. So there was no procurement technology, no policies, no systems. There wasn't really a team in place. And over the course of the past 4 or 5 years, we've basically built out our capabilities using technology, built organizational competence,
amazing
policies, systems, processes, and things like that. And it's been really, really enjoyable. I think Kantar was unique. It was a kind of greenfield opportunity that you rarely get in your career. The internal stakeholders were very supportive to the transformation that I wanted to lead. And our shareholders, were very vested in the benefits that procurement could bring to the overall financial performance of the company. So it's been, a unique moment in my career, I would say.
Amazing. And you basically stood up a whole procurement function for something when you did the separation. So that's really interesting. So we'll get into how you got to this part. So starting from the very beginning, the topic of discussion here is how you got into procurement and the learnings you've had across the journey. So if I can ask you to cast your mind and back, maybe give us a little bit of context of how you got into procurement, how you maybe even got into the world of work and your first experience. Has it been really good to get that? So
well, it's a great question, really, because from a very early age, I was kind of like a lot of people, newspaper rounds, working in Tesco's, picking strawberries. I always kind of had hustles to try and generate some money. But the kind of side story was that I really struggled academically at school. So and subsequently what we found out is that I had ADHD and dyslexia. And things that a lot of people have to handle, right? So I don't want to make this sound like it's bad, but it was in the context of my own learning journey. It's certainly helped me contextualize my time when I was younger at school, and it wasn't a great success. And what happened was that I grew up in Coventry, so in the Midlands, and there was an opportunity to go and spend a week, an internship, I suppose you would call it,
Yeah.
at Rolls-Royce Aerospace
Oh,
when I
wow.
was 15.
Amazing.
So I spent a week in Rolls-Royce, and I worked for well, I didn't work. I kind of shadowed the materials manager, as it was then called.
Okay.
You'd call it a procurement role these days, I suppose. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really, really interesting. You know, this idea of negotiating with suppliers, trying to get things to arrive and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was back in the day where, and then you go at lunchtime and you went to the director's restaurant.
Oh, yes.
And the director's restaurant was silver service.
Of course.
I mean, just things that are just unimaginable now.
And at
but
15, that must have been, apart from the fact that at 15 you get such an experience.
Well,
being in a place like that.
Well, that's exactly
then
right.
having to deal with that, but it must be an eye-opener, changing completely. This is what the future could look like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so straight away I thought, this really kind of resonates as something that would be really interesting to pursue. So I scraped by with GCSEs, and then I went on and did my A-levels. My A-levels were well, I won't disclose the grades, but they weren't spectacular, let's put it like that. And what I did was I went to Coventry University and ended up doing an HND initially. And a HND these days, and what happens if students don't necessarily get the right A-level grades, they do like a foundation. So I think the best way to think about the HND in the modern context was a foundation.
Yeah.
And through that, I got to do a business studies degree.
Wow.
And as I did the business studies degree, it was a series of industrial placements. So I spent 6 months at an automotive manufacturer, 6 months at a company called Massey Ferguson that makes tractors. And then the last 6 months, I got back to Rolls-Royce that had been kind enough to me when I was 15. So at this point, I was 19. And I spent the summer there, and they offered me a sponsorship for my final year at university.
Wow,
so I did the final year at Rolls-Royce Aerospace, and then I went into a graduate role in procurement at Rolls-Royce Aerospace. So it was almost like the stars had aligned. So
it's right from the start. You've been within procurement, really, in many ways,
absolutely.
from the age of 15, which is probably.
And a lot of people do say, well, we stumbled into it, we didn't really know. But from an early age, this materials management, this kind of procurement, it just sounded very, very appealing.
And did you, just to ask a specific a part of it, is there been when you were 19 then, and you know where Rolls-Royce, did you go out and reach out to them to go and work for them at that point when this is your second time round, right? Did you have to actively do it yourself at that point?
It was, I mean, you had to kind of, in those days, you wrote letters to the personnel department and said, is there any opportunities for work placements and things like that? And they had an opportunity over the summer.
Yeah, that's incredible. Again, one of those things we were talking earlier on about what to inspire your children with. It's like understanding that age is down to you, and it can be down to you to also push for some of these things. So that's really interesting to know that you actually actively went there, and it wasn't like something which appeared again.
It's interesting you say that, because you look back, I mean, I don't know how you are, but you just collect stuff as you go through your life.
Yeah.
We were recently kind of clearing out some paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And I had all of the letters that I wrote to all of the companies to try and secure those 3 placements.
Amazing.
And I wrote over 100 letters to different companies in the Midlands trying to get those industrial placements.
Yeah.
And I kept all of the reject letters as well.
Yeah. Which, again, for me, this is so inspirational that way, because this thing happening at the age of 19, I know that 19, you're adult and grown up, but I would say that not every 19-year-old necessarily thought about being so active. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So you were then in Rolls-Royce and you were in procurement, which is amazing. So that's how you. So tell me a little bit about those first experiences where you're no longer being necessarily shadowed. So you had to take on your own responsibility.
Yeah.
How did it feel to go into those first negotiations, first, a hosting of complex meetings or larger meetings. Give me a sense of the experience and cast your memory back to those things. And for those who are maybe at that point of their journey starting out, what were the things that maybe you remember as tips and suggestions?
Well, the first thing I'd like to do, if I had the opportunity, there are people that I'd like to go back in my career and I'd like to say thank you.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I'd love to say thank you to the people at Rolls-Royce that gave me my first break. Bernard, Jim, Noreen, there's a cast of characters that you meet in your career. And the thing about Rolls-Royce at the time, I was working with people that had fought in the Korean War and done national service. So that tapestry of people that you were working with was just unbelievable. It was I always say to people, I think if you want to learn about procurement, start at the bottom and at the real coal face of some of the things that you have to do. And, these roles were I was just buying stuff and feeding the factory with all of its materials and everything it needed to kind of process the manufacture of turbine blades. And you've got factories and you've got skilled labor waiting for the arrival of these materials so they can meet their production schedules. So you learn a lot about having to be reactive and respond. And you had job titles in those days like production superintendent, all these people. And the superintendents were like the gods of the factories. Gosh, I remember one story, a guy called Sid Speck, his name was. And in those days, this is so funny. It sounds so strange, I'm sure, but in those days, these superintendents, they had their own parking slots,
of course,
which specifically said superintendent can park here only. I used to drive to work in a Morris Minor, which is a very old car, and I used to just stick it in the slot of the superintendent. This guy called Sid Speck at the time, God, he really gave me a telling off for sticking my car there.
Of course.
But it was just rough and tough. There was systems, there were processes, you were responding to things all the time. And what happened was I had a really great 2 years there, and then the role of a senior buyer came up, and I was just a buyer. I mean, I didn't have, and I went for the role, and they said, "Oh, you haven't really got the experience to go for the role." And I thought to myself, well, that's true, but I don't fancy sticking around for the next several years before I can make it to become a senior buyer. I really want to energize, I want to progress. And I think that's common for all of us, isn't it? We start, we learn our trade, and then we get very energized and we want to move on and all those kind of things. And I encourage people to do that. I think employers and young talent, there's kind of an implicit dynamic there that you never really talk about, which is you're not going to be here forever, but then at the same time, don't expect to be paid like a millionaire, but what's the trade-off? Well, you're going to learn your trade, get tons of experience, and what you give is 2 or 3 years of commitment. I think that's a reasonable exchange. Anyway, so it's a long career, so I'll very quickly accelerate to the interesting bits. So then I left, went to go and work for Philips Medical Systems. They then sold that business. So I went to go and work for a company called Nortel Networks, which is very similar, basically building telecoms infrastructure. What happened there was I got them to sponsor me to do a master's degree at Birmingham University with a professor called Andrew Cox. And back in the day, there was Andrew, there were kind of 3 disciples of supply chain and procurement. One was Bath University, one was Birmingham University, and the one was Cranfield. And they all had particular points of view about power dynamics, how you orchestrate a supply chain. So Bath and Cranfield were very much about lean supply chain. Andrew Cox and Chris, the professors there, talked a lot about you can't have a lean supply chain if you don't understand the dynamics of the power of the supply chain in which you're operating in. So really interesting stuff. Anyway, I did that. I'm sure I shouldn't reveal this, but I got that degree, and then Nortel, it was the time of the dot-com boom, so it's going back over 25 years now. And suddenly Nortel went into reverse, and I was looking for my next promotion. Anyway, I went to a company called One to One, which became T-Mobile, which is now Everything Everywhere. And they were looking for a head of supply chain. Now, as you know, the descriptions of procurement and supply chain do get a bit mixed up sometimes.
They do.
And this
flow into each other.
This supply chain role was about logistics, warehousing, customer fulfillment, handset repairs, and all that kind of stuff.
And had you had that kind of experience?
No,
at that
none
point
of
in
that
time?
experience
None of that
whatsoever. No.
Apart from maybe some interaction when you were at Rolls-Royce, some of the production,
yeah,
but you
yeah.
didn't really. Why?
But believe it or not, I got that role, got the role of head of supply chain
Oh, wow.
for a business that was growing at 30, 40% a year.
Oh, wow.
Inheriting a supply chain that was very, I would say, looking back, those guys took a gamble on me.
And why do you think they took a gamble of you if you look back then? Was it just around...
Well, if I'm honest, I don't think they knew very much about the people that were interviewing me didn't know very much about supply chain either.
Right. Here's someone who's willing to do it. Let's chuck it at him.
Yeah.
And has got a good CV to date, at least.
And that was really a transformation because we implemented SAP.
Yeah.
We had to transform the performance of the supply chain from an inventory logistics perspective. And there's a time when I was there, I can proudly say that, we transformed it. We had the best performing supply chain within the group of the mobile operators of T-Mobile.
And you were learning on the job on that specific thing. So I suppose, how did you go about learning on the job in that case? Did you spend a lot of time with just the technical people? Did you have to do a lot of
I think
learning, going out there, going to conferences? What kind of things did you do at that point?
All of those things. Always being very, very naturally inquisitive. Always being interested in the broader context of the role I performed and how it supported the company. I think, I'm sure people might be curious about my perspective on how you get to become a CPO. And one of the things I think is you don't have those elevator conversations with the CEO about procurement. You have the elevator conversation with the CEO about how the business is performing and what his challenges are and things like that. And I've always been very naturally curious about business and the broader context in which the company's operating in, how our competitors are doing and what they're doing and all those kind of things. So definitely some of my experiences, the expertise have been, certainly in the early days, self-taught, that's for sure.
Yeah. And what, if we take a slight pause there and say, right, to that point, what were the key things that you learned about yourself, the role, and what were some of the tips maybe you'd give people?
Well, I mean, so many examples at T-Mobile. The one that probably I'll share with you was that, like a lot of companies, you do the engagement surveys.
Yeah.
That's quite good intelligence. And as I said, the performance of the work that I was doing was really, really good relative to the overall performance of the group. So I was really, really happy. Did the employment engagement scores, and the mood of the people that were working within the team I was responsible for were terrible.
Right.
And that was really a reflection, in truth, in my immaturity and, how I was, not really managing and leading people, as being very directive and very opinionated and not really getting the best out of the talent that I could.
That's really interesting, because what you were telling me there is that the markers outside would have been seen as success. You managed to achieve all your targets, get everything done.
Yeah.
But internally, it was done through basically you holding all the strings and controlling as much as you can.
Yeah.
So you were driving it, which is maybe come out as a reflection of really your scores at that point in time.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And again, this is part of self-awareness, right?
That's
Especially in hindsight, knowing that you were able to see that I was successful from the external markers, but now I realize that there's this new challenge I need to work on.
Yeah, that's right. So, and that's exactly what happened. So I worked for a boss called Liliana Solomon, and we'll come back to her in a minute, I'm sure, when I tell you what else I went on and did.
Yeah.
And she got me a coach.
Yeah.
And that coach really helped me kind of deconstruct my kind of mode of operating, how I thought about myself and how I thought about running and operating things and change.
Sorry, I'm going to go into this a little bit, because this is actually quite an interesting topic for a lot of people, no doubt. So you must have, and I'm sure you'll tell us more about it, but you must have realized that the way you wanted to drive success is knowing and having control. So probably having to relinquish some of that and giving trust must have been one of the key things to the right people, so that they can deliver and have that responsibility.
Well, I think that's right.
Is that what?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, I think that, looking back, the measures of success aren't just in the here and now.
Yeah.
It's also the legacy that you want to leave behind in terms of how well what you've accomplished is able to continue to thrive and develop post you leaving the role that you were in. I mean, and increasingly what I begin to think is that's the best measure of success rather than what you achieve in the here and now. Now, of course, that's not quite true. You have to deliver your day-to-day results and all those kind of things. But I think the ask of leadership is that you also build kind of capability and depth
Of course.
and modes of operation that survive the point of inflection that you've contributed to that change.
Yeah, and once you leave, you want to ensure it continues
Well, of course
successful.
you
It
do.
is, because
Yeah.
otherwise, do you see that as a success or do you not? Because
Yeah,
it needs you otherwise for it to run.
That's
which,
right.
to be frank, is what any CEO even has to deal with.
Well, of course it does.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a bit the idea that, some people can get a bit into a situation where, oh, this organization can't thrive without me. I'm integral to their operation. If you really have that thought, then you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And you probably got a rather toxic or unpleasant
Yeah.
cultural thought about what you want to leave behind
Yeah.
and what your role is within the business.
Yeah, your perception of it and then what the actual team is. And
Yeah.
which is really useful. I suppose you learned that a few years back when.
Well, look. What I would say is I learned it early enough in my career that I could then course correct.
Yeah.
So that the subsequent stuff that I've done, I've always tried to be thoughtful about the team that I'm building, the opportunities that I'm creating for the team members to learn and grow, and just creating that kind of environment where people feel that they can be themselves.
And that's really interesting because we often speak in this series about the experiences at the earlier age, and I think in some ways you're already at that stage where you're leading a team. I don't know how large that team was, but you're having to learn some of those leadership skills. What was sort of the biggest? I mean, I think one of the tips you just said here is doing those scores, assessments, and then realizing, and then bringing in a coach to help you correct that. What were the biggest challenges for you to do that change at that point, and what did you do to change it?
Well, self-awareness is one of the big things that I think you have to practice.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you have to think about the influence, and that you have to really train your emotional intelligence and really have some insight in terms of the mood that you're creating in the organization. Now, look, there have been situations, in fact, there's one just recently where I really had to go quite hard on a particular topic that's in our business. But the point is, that shouldn't be the continuous mode.
No.
That should be the intervention mode. The continuous mode should be coaching, development, training, capability building, and all those kind of things. And I think certainly my journey was that's what I learned at an early age, that kind of crisis mode. Yes, it gets results, but it doesn't build long-term sustainability.
Yeah.
It's a mode that you can operate for a short period of time, but then you have to very quickly build a more capable mode of operation.
It cannot be your usual business as usual.
You can't, otherwise you just destroy the organization.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to work for you.
And I suppose you have to also communicate that, right? You have to say, look, we're getting into a crisis mode. We'll do this. It'll be, keep the communication open. We'll work really hard to achieve this target. After that, you can get back into sort of normal.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Incredible. And so moving on from your career at that point, moving further along the chain, at that point, you probably went off to your next role as such?
Well, I did. What happened was I went to Cable and Wireless for a very short period of time. A very famous company that
super.
The short story on Cable and Wireless was they had all of their consumer telco assets.
Yeah.
They decided to sell those assets and put all of their cash into highly priced enterprise assets. Completely destroyed the value of the business. So it was very much in restructuring mode.
Wow.
I was there a short while, and then I got a phone call from somebody called Liliana Solomon. It's been quite influential in my career, and she'd been my boss at T-Mobile, and she'd said, I've just become the CEO of Vodafone Romania.
Okay.
Would you like to come and work in Romania and become the head of procurement and supply chain?
Woo.
So I flew for the interview, went to Bucharest.
Yeah.
Didn't tell my wife, rang my wife up and said, I've got a new job. She said, oh, really? I didn't know you were going for one. Yeah, it's working with Liliana again. She said, oh, great. You'll enjoy that. Well, where's the role? I said, it's in Romania. And we had I have to say, we had a fantastic 3-4 years in Romania. It was a wonderful experience.
So that again, this is really interesting because obviously this till now, pretty much English companies or British
Yeah,
companies, you stay in the UK
yeah,
and doing this jump,
yeah.
which I don't know if you mentioned the year exactly, but Romania
2006.
2006.
Yeah,
So there's still quite a lot of European influence at that point. So probably things starting to amalgamate, but still quite a different culture. And
yeah.
it's not like everybody speaks English. So yeah, how was that experience of going and becoming a leader there? What was sort of that first? How did it feel to first get in there and then go, right, what am I going to do now? Because I've got a bunch of people who probably don't speak that well English. In some cases, maybe they do, but the
Yeah, yeah,
communication is not as good as they would
yeah,
be if they spoke their own language. And same for you.
yeah.
What were the first steps you took
Well,
there?
so if anybody's got any thoughts about Romania, let me tell you some things that it definitely is. So first, it's a romantic language country.
Yeah.
So it has Latin in its
Mm.
language. Secondly, the language skills of Romanians are unbelievable.
Oh,
I
really?
mean, everybody spoke English.
Okay, so
So
scrap everything I've just said to
yeah,
them.
yeah. I mean, the third thing is a country of extraordinary beauty.
Wow.
There are perceptions of Romania and Romanians, but what I will tell people is it was a country that we really, really enjoyed and explored extensively and all those kind of things. The challenge in voting for Romania actually wasn't so much the cultural challenge.
Okay.
The challenge was that it had been it was a very entrepreneurial company. It had been founded by some Canadian founders that would call it Connex,
Mm-hmm.
and it had a real strong cultural brand and heritage. And it brought customer service to Romania, where historically that hadn't really existed. So, the people will still talk very warmly about the brands. Actually, the issue wasn't so much me as an English person coming to Romania. It was more about the transformation of that heritage brand
Okay.
into becoming Vodafone, which was a global brand.
Global company.
And
Yeah.
you might imagine there's lots of changes in terms of brand attributes, brand perception, and then also the DNA within the company in terms of how it ran and operated, and needed to adapt more of the kind of global controls and processes that a company like Vodafone would expect to operate than perhaps in a more entrepreneurial mode in Romania.
So what steps did you take to start?
Well, again,
if we kind of open it up.
I had to build the procurement function.
Yep.
I had to build the supply chain function.
And sorry, just getting into this. So
Yeah.
did you decide I'm going to bring local people in? Did you try and bring in people you knew? How did that
No. We built the team up from
ground up.
with local talent. Yeah,
Great.
And there was a lot of local talent in there as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Lots of great people, but many of them had worked for large international brands, BAT, SAB, Miller, and the likes. So there's lots of education, lots of talent and expertise that we could lean on that would help us transform that. My head of supply chain, Silvio Valisassi, he was from Coke.
Okay.
Head of procurement came from the automotive industry.
Wow.
Head of property, very, very experienced, George Sibu. So they were great people, yeah, and there was expertise and talent there, no doubt.
And this was a CPO role already at that
Head
point?
of procurement,
head of procurement or
supply chain for the business, yeah.
Director. So was this your first big role where you were hiring effectively other heads as well to work with?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I went at Cable and Wireless. What happened was I ended up being the Chief Procurement Officer of the international business, but I didn't really fancy that gig, to be honest with you, because it was all in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So yeah, it was my first kind of big role, I would say,
that you had to get your hands,
get my hands dirty and really drive the change and transformation. Again, Liliana gave me some great support, and I was very grateful for that.
And what were some of the challenges of setting up the team that you then had to tackle, and what suggestions you may give to people who are at that part of their career now?
Well, it's like everything. I mean, obviously, being culturally aware of how you transmit requests and try and deal with issues versus how they get communicated in English to Romanian and how it goes from Romanian to Romanian is very, very subtle. And what I was very conscious of is with the heritage that Romania had during the communist times, going back to my just being really thoughtful about my style and the way in which I conveyed change and transformation was very important to me, that I was seeing someone that was upgrading the capabilities of the people I was working with,
Of course.
rather than someone that was coming over with a kind of command and control approach.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
So again, some of the learnings you've had, which is the great piece about this connecting dots.
Yeah.
And if you look at that point in time, and if we put a little bit of a pause in your career, one of the questions we typically ask is, there's obviously a lot of influence on a personal level. I mean, you already alluded to the fact that you had to sort of uproot your family, spend a few years in another place. Were there any challenges that you had to deal with at a personal life, apart from, the uprooting of the family, that you have influenced your career to this point, or even going forwards, that you're willing to share, that you've realized at that point in your career, or have realized now?
I mean, what the folks watching the podcast won't know, we had a little chat before we started. I mean, your Italian heritage, and what might surprise people is that my own grandmother was Italian. And she moved over from Italy at the end of the Second World War with my grandfather to live in the Midlands, and she was a wonderful woman, and she had real courage to go and move from Italy to the United Kingdom, and what that would have meant to her culturally, and all of the challenges that would have presented her. And she did that for the love of my grandfather. So what I would say is that deep down, I think that courage to embrace different cultures was rooted in me in an early age, because as I said, whether I was just ignorant or naive, it never occurred to me that moving to Romania would be culturally something that I would really find challenging. I mean, I knew it would be a difficult gig, but it wasn't because I didn't think it was going to be difficult because I was moving to Romania. I thought it was going to be difficult because it was this very famous Connex brand moving into a Vodafone brand, and that was all of the change that would go with that. And I think that has been something that has been with me pretty much all of my career. I really enjoy working with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different ethnicity. It doesn't faze me. I enjoy learning about them as individuals and how we think about solutions together.
Yeah, that's good. And particularly to that example, for someone who's maybe doing a similar sort of thing in Romania, was there any particular piece that you'd recommend someone should look out for? For example, I did a gig back in Italy. I've worked most of my career here, and when I went there, for someone who came from the head office here in the UK for that company, said, "Oh, these guys are always going to this bar and having this 65 coffees every day. I don't know what they're doing, right? Can you just find out, because you're Italian, like, what's going on?" And I was like, I don't need to find out. I know exactly what it is. That's them doing business.
Yeah,
they just continue on instead of going to the water cooler and stuff. You go to there. And actually, I suggested, why don't you go and have those coffees as well? So was there anything of that sort of nature that is really interesting in the Romanian way of doing business?
I mean, this is very much my observation, so I don't want this to become kind of that's how you do business in Romania. But it did occur to me that, there would be a lot of arguments and shouting and fighting. And you think in Romania, and you think, well, they're never going to get an answer. And then they come out of it, they've got an answer, and they're great friends, and no one's offended, and all that kind of stuff. And that, of course, I didn't speak Romanian. Very, very few words could I learn or did learn. But that was culturally, as a Brit, I think we're programmed in the art of, understatement, all this kind of stuff. And then in some of those, and again, I want to be careful, because I don't want people to be offended that my perceptions don't speak to what culture is like. But the Latin culture is sometimes like, everyone's nice and peaceful, then the voices get raised, big debates, big arguments, and then everyone agrees, and it goes that way.
Basically, what I'm taking from that is, let it happen. Don't come in and kind of, because you're used to like, a sensible conversation is a quiet where everyone gives an opinion. Let them all have that. Let it happen the way they're used to doing it.
That's what I learned.
Get out of it.
Absolutely, Set the conditions, open up the debate. Don't set the boundaries. in the sense of what they debate and learn. Alongside that, you talk about lessons. The other one that I've learned is about this concept of psychological safety.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I've worked for many people where and I won't mention their names because that wouldn't be fair,
No,
but
of
they
course.
were you couldn't raise a problem with them because they didn't want to hear it, or they didn't really. They just wanted to know that it was being managed or being dealt with, but they didn't really want to entertain a conversation around the issues or the topics and things like that. What I've learned very early on is that's really culturally destructive. If you're working with a team and you're working on a problem, you start the meeting. Oh, Marco, so straight away you go in and say, so where are we on this topic? Yada yada yada. So no kind of Marco, how are you?
Mm,
How's the day gone? How was the family over the weekend?
mm.
Um, how are you? If you don't start the first 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I've always practiced that art of just allowing people to get into the zone,
Yeah.
allow them to share what's going on in their personal lives and all those kind of
Mhm.
things, and taking an interest in them. Then allowing them to express their concerns or their reservations about a particular situation or a problem. And I think that's a very healthy approach to lead. I read a book, I can't remember the name of it, but it was
Mhm.
about um, um, businesses in the States, particularly the entrepreneurial businesses
Yeah.
from Silicon Valley, and why they are just so much better
Mm.
at what they practice and how they operate. And it was this concept of psychological safety, allowing people to bring issues to a table. You don't necessarily solve them for them.
Mm.
You kind of still, as part of leadership, you have to expect people to come
Yeah.
with resolutions. You have to help them fix those problems and all those kind of things. But
Yeah.
yeah, not allowing people to bring stuff to the table or wanting to shut off the conversations or stuff like that, I think is really dangerous. And I would say again, that's something I've had to practice and lean into
Yeah.
as part of that kind of point I made about cultural engagement and the tone that you set within the organization. I think definitely my time in Romania and then subsequently has helped me practice that quite a bit.
Sounds a bit like me and my partner talking when she tells me all about our problems and I go into solution mode where I'm meant to just listen.
And that's a common problem.
I think so. Good. No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Combining the two, which is again, we're all people, right? So
Yeah.
these two things do flow into each other, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. So now at that point in your career, you've pretty much completed your Romanian gig. What's that next step? Because it sounded like, of course, successful, set up a
Yeah.
team, did a really great
Yeah.
gig elsewhere. Did you fly back? Did you
Well,
come back? How was the next
I
evolution?
mean, it was so I was working in the markets. I was working
Okay.
for a guy called Carsten Wilberger.
Okay.
Carsten has had a very successful career. He's gone on to become a minister in the German government now,
Oh, wow.
leading their digital transformation.
Great.
Liliana was the CEO. But like everything, it was an expat gig. You have to find your next one. And the CPO of Vodafone during those days was a guy called Detlef Schultz.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of people know Detlef, and that was in 2006, and that was at the beginning of the creation of the Vodafone Procurement Company. So, I was in Romania doing my thing in Romania, but then part of the global family of procurement and supply chain, where we just then been hardwired into the procurement community and all that kind of stuff. And Detlef had the opportunity for head of procurement in the UK for Vodafone. So I went from being a big fish in a small pond to being a small fish in a bigger pond, which was Vodafone UK. So we at that point we had 4 children. So our youngest son Finn was born in Romania, and we came back to England in 2009, 2010, working for Vodafone UK, which is a big cultural adjustment because, I mean, again, for anybody who's had the expat experience, we had a cleaner in the house every day, a driver and a gardener. Now you're back to the UK, you've got 4 children, you're back in the house that you left with the mortgage, with the lifestyle that you thought you were going to have that you haven't anymore.
Yeah,
So,
and the cleaning yourself and the gardening yourself. I know that experience, yes.
Yeah. And then I did that for a couple of years, and then so again, so interesting, Vodafone up until that point was the dominant mobile operator in the UK. You look back, you had Beckham, had sponsored Man United. It was
Incredible.
doing loads of stuff with mobile phones and all those kind of things. What did he get wrong? Had an argument with Steve Jobs.
Oh,
So
yes.
if you remember, when the iPhone was launched, it was launched on the O2 network.
Yes, I remember
And
that.
they had it exclusively for 3 or 4 years. And they just basically dominated client acquisition and all that kind of stuff. So it took a CEO called Guy Lawrence, again, he's had a great career. He was the commercial director on James Bond movies. He was the CEO of one of the big restaurant chains that was founded by all the movie stars, Hollywood.
Yeah, and I know
Hard Rock
which one.
Cafe,
Hard
and
Rock
then
Cafe,
then the other one. He was that. He was the CEO of Chelsea Football Club. So, he was a real game changer, that guy. And anyway, so he'd come into the UK to really try and rejuvenate it, and then I joined as part of that business as well.
So you went from, again, to using your words, you went from big fish in a small pond
Yeah.
to becoming a small fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about some of the challenges there, because now you're having to deal with lots of other big heads.
Yeah.
What were your approaches to build those relationships and actually, get communally as a business what you wanted to do, but what you also had your drive there?
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult, because I was kind of seeing the CFO, the CEO every day in Romania. We were always talking about stuff.
Yeah.
And then straight away you're in the UK, and I was, if I'd see the CEO once a month, I was lucky. And I I thought to myself, flipping out, I don't think this really suits me. I quite liked the attention of the executives and all that kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden, I hardly ever see them. But but it was what it was. And what I realized is, well, actually, the gig now isn't influencing those two people as instantly as you did in Romania. It's now influencing that much wider ecosystem of leaders that are in the business, who, by the way, are there on their own merits as well. So don't start being the arrogant idiot that thinks you're the big I am. You're now part of a much bigger leadership team, and you need to put your big boy boots on and just get on with it. So that's pretty much what I did.
So the influencing aspect of this is quite important, right? And a topic I wanted to get into a little bit. Influencing similar experienced senior people who also are working in their community. You can't go in there and going, this is what we need to do in procurement. You have to go in like, this is what the business targets are. But they all have their own competing interests, and often they can be a challenge. They could be opposing to what you're trying to do. What's your approach on those situations, and how do you tackle those things? Because that must have been the case.
But that really puzzles me sometimes when they say that, because I hear those dialogues. The procurement objective is somehow different from the business objective. I can't say that I've ever really seen that, or perhaps I've been able to translate the business objectives into a way which I can understand how procurement can contribute. So in answer to your question, I thought my role always was understand where the divisions or the business units are going, and just think about how I can contribute to their success, and how I can help them deliver what they need to be delivered.
And if you open that up, you're talking about speaking the communal language. You're not going to go and speak to HR about procurement. You're going to talk to your colleague in HR about what they're trying to do communally towards the target of Vodafone at that point.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's the ask. As you go up through the chain of command, you're not going in there and you're not talking to HR directors saying the procure to pay process isn't working. And by the way, your colleagues in HR aren't placing purchase orders in a timely way,
or they're spending too much money on multiple agencies.
No,
it's more about what are you trying to do?
You could have that conversation in the context of what I said earlier, which is there's a situation, everybody's all hands to the pump. You have to get super, digital, granular, and you've got to deal with a particular problem at a point in time. But that's not a way in which you engage the business. You've got to ask the business, what problems do they need you to help them solve for? And that's what I've always thought is the approach.
No, and it makes complete sense, and that's the part. And if you were to give a tip to someone who's starting that, so you've given us some tips around, starting your big role, building up the team. Tips for those who are going into this role, going as a senior leader
Yeah.
themselves, but amongst many other senior leaders.
Yeah.
What are the key things that you would recommend people did?
Well, I mean, certainly, I mean, again, I'm giving you a very polished point of view to all of this, of course, but that polish is to some degree based on experience. And I can tell
It's
you that
hindsight.
from a very early age, it was, I found it a bit intimidating, talking to CFOs, CEOs, and obviously, you're constantly rehearsing in your mind, what am I going to say to them, that is going to have some interest in what I've got to say, that they're going to think that I'm a capable, competent individual and all those kind of things. So, what I would say to people is if you're having feelings of self-doubt, or they're actually they're very natural feelings, to be honest with you. So don't lose any stress about, worrying about, those things. Just embrace it and accept that's just part of growing up and learning to handle the gig first and foremost. So, and therefore there isn't kind of a magic formula of how you go in and have a conversation with a CEO. You're going to just go in there for the first time. It's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable. You're going to get hot and sweaty and embarrassed and constantly rethink and reframe. And then you're going to do it again, then you're going to do it again, and you're going to get more comfortable. And then what you do is you begin to get more comfortable about talking to the role rather than the individual. So that's the other thing as well, because sometimes, if Marco, you're the CFO, am I talking to the role of the CFO and thinking about what the CFO issues are that need to be solved for? And am I thinking about Marco, the individual? And my experience has been what you very quickly need to gravitate to is away from Marco, the individual, to Marco, the CFO, and what are the big issues that the CFO needs to deal with and tackle, and how can I contribute to that?
Yeah.
And then Marco, the individual, well, that's just, are we going to build empathy? Are we going to have a joke? Are we going to share a coffee? Maybe we might not. Maybe we won't get to that level of intimacy, but we will get to that level of intimacy if we think about Marco as the CFO and the topics that Marco needs to deal with. And that's always been my way of handling it, really.
Yeah,
particularly when you've got those difficult personalities. You're not going to always get on with the people that you work at an individual level, but you will be able to navigate a path of cooperation based on their roles and what they need accomplished and how you can play that part.
Yeah. So supporting them in their endeavors, really, in terms of what they want to achieve. And I suppose what you're saying is learn and understand that rather than go there. Again, what you're saying, you might have some things and topics you want to cover, rehearse, and you get worried and get all sweaty about it as such. But the reality is you're going there, you're asking questions, you're learning what they want to do.
Absolutely.
And then feed it at the right time.
And the other thing that I've become more comfortable about, and then obviously there's always this sense that if you get asked a question, you have to have the answer to. And look, the number of times that I've been in meetings and someone's been asked a question and that they've just given a bullshit answer because they don't know the answer. And sometimes I just think to myself, just turn around and say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you know what? I'll get the answer to that question.
The power of I don't know and those things.
Honestly, it mystifies me. I don't know what it is, but sometimes there's almost like a judgment that goes with competence, where if you answer a question with I don't know, there's a judgment of competence. I actually think a better judgment of competence is saying I don't know.
No, you know your limits of what you know at this point in time.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean you're not able to find out.
And then the measure of competence is, can you get an answer to the question at a later date? Again, I constantly reframe that in my mind.
That's a really interesting, really powerful tip. So moving on from that point in your career, so Vodafone, you've done a big role there, achieved some big targets, I assume, without disclosing what your strategic targets were. What's the next? How did this evolution?
Well, I went to work in Luxembourg, Vodafone Luxembourg, on the VPC board, as it was, working for Detlev. And then I was commuting. We left, my wife and the children were in the UK. We'd had some health challenges with the kids, so we decided to keep them in the UK, and I commuted. And then I'd done 8-9 years at Vodafone. I just thought it was time for a change. So Liliana again reached out to me, and I went to go and work for a company in Munich that was the former Siemens Business Enterprise Services company, going through a big restructuring. It eventually got sold to Atos. That got sold to Atos, and then I went to go and work for Pearson, the publishing company, running their supply chain for publishing.
Wow.
Did that for 3 years. I must say it's probably the hardest company I ever worked for.
Okay.
You know,
Because of the industry we're operating in.
it's just
Or
the
the culture
personality,
as
the
well.
leaders within the business, really.
Mhm.
That I look back, and it was a business that was under immense pressure and immense change. Um, but the tone and the people I was working with were very anti-change
Mhm.
and not really up for the transformation. And I was part of a operations and transformation organization led by a guy called Ziggy, who was trying to drive a lot of change and a lot of transformation and coming up against a lot of organizational resistance.
Yeah.
And it was very uncomfortable. And we implemented Oracle in the United States to replace their supply chain technology and all that kind of stuff. It didn't go very well. It was pretty tough project, and at the end of it, I was pretty much done in, to be honest with you. So
Yeah. And what was your learning on that difficult sort of scenario?
well, resilience is one thing.
Yeah.
So there was time. I spent several months in the United States on daily calls, 7 days a week, trying to nurture the stand-up of the new Oracle technology into running and operating the order fulfillment and the warehouse shipping for the back-to-season period of higher education. So unsurprisingly, students go back to university, they want to order their books and all those kind of things. It's a big kind of lump of supply chain. So that was pretty tough. But also, I think just having the confidence to know that when you've done as much as you can, sometimes it's not going to be good enough and it's time to move on.
Yeah. And you mentioned Lily Arnold a couple of
Yeah,
times in this.
yeah.
What was your sort of, mentorship is something we talk about on this series. What was your learning from her? If you could give me like the one big tip you learned from her.
She is. She should talk about her in the present now because she's still an active business executive. She's courageous. I mean, she just imagine, go back to 2001. She's the CFO of T-Mobile UK within Deutsche Telekom. So even for a female to reach that level within a German business was a phenomenal achievement. And she has been fearless in taking on vested interests within a company. So I've thoroughly enjoyed working for her. So she's a change agent. So she drives change at a frenetic pace. And the third thing, she always gave me the freedom to operate, the freedom to make changes, drive or transform. I think autonomy is the word I'm looking for. She always gave me the autonomy to drive change and transformation.
If you whistled it down to what was the thing you learned most about yourself from what your experience with Lily as well?
Well, I think conviction. I think, if you've got a really, really strong point of view, I think it's important that you stick with it. Yeah. Now, you've got to apply those convictions with care, of course. I mean, there's no point, being so that you turn the organization. But, having conviction and a strong point of view, I think is very important.
I think what you're saying there is if there's an aim and a target built on some real stuff, there'll be bumps and difficulties along the way. You got to stick to it to get to where you want to get to effectively. That's great. So at that point, then you moved on.
Yeah, so I left Pearson, and then I did some work with HP, the global manufacturer of printers and things like that. They're really an incredibly innovative company, and we think of them today as people that we buy printing machines from that we have at home. What people might not know is they have a massive industrial printing business. And I was helping them just think about how they drove their print on demand strategy. So I did a bit of consulting work there, really enjoyed that. And then the opportunity to join Kantar arrived.
Oh, wow. So that was, and quite a number of leadership roles for quite a few of those roles you've actually had. And there's, again, going back to the sort of mentorship learnings part of it, were there any particular things that have now given you self-awareness of what you're really the strongest at? I think I'm starting to get a sense of what it is. And that you could share with people about, I'm really good at this and these are my best tips at
Yeah, I
doing
mean,
that.
so you at the beginning of this podcast, I kind of said a little bit about my journey education in realizing over time that I had dyslexia and ADHD. Well, why do I make mention of that again now? Because if you were to ask me to put an Excel spreadsheet together, I'd be terrible at doing that. I mean, I would really struggle to orchestrate the numbers, probably because I've got this calculator, which is a struggle with numbers. If you give me the numbers pre-populated and you take me through it, I'll understand it straight away. So knowing that, if the CFO says to me, Steve, 2 and 2, and I come up with 5, and he says, Steve, it's 4. I say, okay, it's 4. I won't get stressed about that. What I will get stressed about is if I don't understand what the numbers mean in terms of the performance of the business. So if I can't read the P&L and the balance sheet and all those kind of things. So that means I just make sure that I surround myself with good, financially equipped business partners that can do that for me and can help me understand and bring those numbers together. And again, I've been very fortunate. I worked with someone called Rachel Morton who was an interim at Kantar, very, very good. Helped me really kind of navigate that. So that's really, really important to me.
So your strength there, what you're saying is knowing your gap and actually bringing in, knowing how to surround yourself with the people who are strong.
Yeah. I always make a joke and say I don't think I'm the best negotiator in town, but I've got the best negotiators I think I could possibly have. Stuart Dalton is our current technology lead. Absolutely brilliant. And then there's been Kath, she looks after all of our direct procurement. Again, brilliant. Michael Hill. I've got a great guy called John Clark at Kantar who helps us drive our transformation strategy and all those kind of things. And I think that's my point. You don't, transformation isn't built by one person. It's built by assembling a set of capabilities. And my role is getting those capabilities to play to their strength, to the strength of everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't need to be the best technology person. I do need to have a point of view about how you bring all of that technology together to get good solutions for the business. And then my role is to make sure that the solutions that we're coming up with as a unit meet what are the business objectives of those stakeholders that I'm engaging with and talking to.
Yeah. So it's clear that your strength there is bringing together the A team, which works for the business requirements as such. And what you're saying there is knowing your gaps, understanding them, knowing what the business needs as gaps, and then filling those gaps in with the right team. And would you say that you're good at the recruitment part of it, or would you say that you just, again, even there you go, I'm really good at bringing the right recruiter with me, which helps me?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be careful here because I know a lot of recruiters and they're all great people, but I don't have one go-to recruiter. I just don't. I've never been in a situation where that's always been something that I've needed.
So you built a network of people.
And that's always the challenge because the recruiters want to help you, but sometimes you have a network. The only problem with the network is, so when I joined Kantar, you might imagine I've got a network of people that what I didn't want to do was build a procurement team that was all look like Stephen Day.
Yeah, of course.
Because there is this issue about how we're bringing diverse talent into the profession of procurement.
Yeah.
So what happened was that I built my first line initially that was very diverse, and then with the talent that we then needed to, in terms of the category managers and all that kind of stuff, I actually gave that challenge to my leadership team. So I said, look, we've built a diverse leadership team here. I now want you to go and recruit the best people. And as you do that, I also want you to give some thought to how that is a diverse mix of talent that we bring into the business. And I didn't get involved in the individual interviewing again, because it was about empowering my team. If I want, for example, Kath to drive the right results, Kath has got to feel that she's bringing in the talent that is going to help her do that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's really good. So yeah, effectively, you're a leader. You're bringing people who you surround yourself with, have the strengths that you may lack or the business actually requires, and then you help them, empower them really to get what they get.
Yeah.
That's great. So yeah, we got to the end of your career, and it's been really interesting and really important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time with us. And,
thank you.
Great to have had you here.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, too.
Cheers.
At Procurato, we're lucky enough to work with some incredible experts like you, and we are able to therefore interview some great people for you to get an understanding and learn from. If you feel like you've got a great story that you could share with us, please do reach out to me. If you like what you see, please drop us a like and drop us a follow. Thanks.